This is the politics of public opinion. Here in this picture, you see Mitt Romney when he ran for, president, and people around him, just kind of representative of the public. Okay, so let's talk about what a political opinion is, because political scientists are interested in measuring political differences by collecting and analyzing information on public opinion. Politics involves dividing scarce resources fairly among competing interests while balancing liberties and rights. Reasonable people may disagree about how and by whom these tasks should be accomplished, and those are political opinions. It's important to note that in our society, right, there's always going to be one party that has more power than the other. That's just how our society is built. If everyone was equal and the same, that'd be a utopia, and it's just not possible to have a utopia. So this picture, I like this picture that shows in picture A, there's a former Prime Minister of Greenland getting a help from a 5-year-old at the voting booth. One of my, hallmarks of, growing up, I remember is going to the polls with my mom and helping her. And then in B, a little boy gets a, American flag from a sailor during Fleet Week. This creates a positive, interaction, right? The parents bring the kids to these events and they do start the socialization process. So this chart here just kind of shows that those who take political value survey, the split between Republicans and Democrats are getting wider and wider, which really isn't surprising. I do encourage you to take a political value survey just to see where you stand. So what is public opinion? Public opinion, that's a collection of popular views about something, perhaps a person, a local or national event, or a new idea. A lot of times we get phone calls or we get text messages or different things like, or we see people at the malls or all asking questions about public opinion. So our personal opinions, including our political opinions, do contribute to public opinion. But it's important to note that it's impossible for public opinion to represent the entire public because the entire public is too large and won't participate in these surveys. It's based on the samples, and we'll talk about samples in a few minutes. So going back to political socialization, how do we form our political ideology? It's formed through life experience and interaction with others. So political socialization, that's the learning of norms and practices of a political system through others and societal institutions. This becomes at a young age. Look at those pictures we looked at. Even before learning about government, people hear the political opinions of others. If your parents are politically active, you're likely to hear that. Agents of political socialization, are people who teach and influence others about politics through the use of information. I am an agent of political socialization. You know, you know, political socialization may include family members, religious leaders. There's some churches, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, is a right-leaning church, and so someone who grows up in the church is, likely to lean right. There's teachers, friends, work colleagues, and others. Sometimes profession even affects us. A lot of elementary school teachers and K through 12 teachers are Democrats, but then I think of like law enforcement, where majority of them are going to be Republican. This kind of shows how on the spectrum of the political orientation of the child based on the parents. All right, so political ideology. Those are the attitudes and beliefs that help shape our opinions on political theory and policy. This changes. There's a saying that I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, if you're young and not a Democrat, you don't have a heart. If you're old and not a Republican, you don't have a brain. Kind of showing how, what's important to you and yours will shift over time. So, your age, education, changed circumstances, or new experiences may subtly change your ideology. But then only events that significantly affect you tend to alter your fundamental beliefs and attitudes. One thing example I'd like to use is your extreme Democrat supporting these lax crime policies that we have in California right now. Well, your house gets burglarized by somebody who was released early from prison, and this person had been arrested multiple times during the day, but because of, these policies, he keeps getting out. He breaks in your house in the middle of the night, you're in it, your family's in it, they tie you up, and you got to wait a day or two until your maid gets there or whoever comes to see you or misses you to find out you were tied up. After an incident like that, a person's, political ideology is likely to change. Their biases are going to change. Different things, different events affect you. Whereas also, if you have a family member who was you believe was wrongfully convicted, right? That's also going to change you. I look at, the Chrisleys from Chrisley Knows Best on USA, Savannah Chrisley, they're very, throughout, their time prior to the parents' incarceration are, right leaning. And now they're moving towards the left because of prison reform issues. So, events affect you. So then that's the idea of polarization. We're very polarized in this country right now. And polarization is a difficulty, in changing underlying attitudes and belief fosters political polarization. That means we won't meet in the middle. Political ideologies and opinions are already being more strictly defined by the political party by which they align. I think our Congress could do a lot right now if they could, put some things aside and meet in the middle to discuss what they need. Then the media, political media fosters polarization. So it should be no surprise to you that the media is biased. Some news outlets style themselves as liberal or conservative and present overt content or political information in which the author makes it clear that only one side is presented. Others claim a lack of bias but present covert content or ideologically slanted information presented as unbiased information in order to influence opinion. So when we do talk about the media further in this class, we're going to talk about these websites that do fact checking. All Sides is one of them, where you can see where the news source lies as far as its bias. That's something that's always very important to consider when looking at the news. But then we have this idea of this guns versus butter debate. So, we have a federal budget, and we're coming up in September. That's usually when they have the federal budget hearings, and things go wrong with the federal budget. So there's one ideology may favor a larger military, more guns. That's going to be your Republicans, and a smaller social benefit scheme. Others may want a smaller military and more social benefits, your Democrats. Problem is, we have limited resources, and the government can't have more guns and more butter. It has to choose between one of them. So the choice forces citizens into opposing groups and starts the polarization. It decreases the likelihood of finding solutions to such problems because we can't compromise. Look at our Congress right now. So our Congress right now, the House is a Republican House, and we have a Democratic Senate. Well, that's a problem because for a bill to become a law, you're going to learn in coming weeks that there has to be an agreement between both parties, both bodies. And, on certain things, it's just not going to happen. We may actually see this happen with the federal budget this year around September 30th. There are a group that are saying they're not going to sign. So we'll see. There's a spectrum of political ideology, just kind of showing from the left to the right. And again, another one left to the right. I really encourage you guys to take one of those political quizzes just to see where you stand. Here is an example on, people that were polled based on political ideology and party on different issues, right? You have Democrats wanting more for healthcare, minimum wage, aid to the needy. You can see them more towards more of the social welfare. It's higher towards, the Democrats, and then the Patriot Act was a necessary tool that helps the government find terrorists. 57% of Republicans say that. Okay. So how do we measure public opinion? Through polling. So polling is where we have we ask a population a series of questions. We collect the responses data, analyze it, and interpret it. So there are limits on polling. The polling is going to be based on the representative size and the sample sizes and things like that, and who's asking. So scientific polling, that has a methodology, just like the scientific method, right? So to create a valid poll, one must identify a topic, identify the survey population and sample, prepare and validate questions to ask all respondents, contact respondents in the sample, complete the number of usable responses needed for the sample, analyze the data, and report the data. So then there's these things called informal polls that do not apply rigorous methodology called straw polls. So we can see straw polls through CPAC, which was a Conservative Political Action Committee. At their events, they have them. Turning Point, Charlie Kirk's group, they have them. And I'm sure the, reflective, Democratic groups have them as well. And that's just basically taking everyone in the auditorium saying, hey, vote. So samples. Researchers identify the desired group of respondents they want to interview. From that population, they get a sample. So a random sample is a limited number of people selected in such a way that each has an equal chance of being chosen. So if I got a phone list, right, of all the students at MSJC, because I wanted to survey them about an issue on campus, and then I decided to text every third person, random sample, right? A representative sample is a group whose demographic distribution is similar to that of the overall population. So that is when they ask you questions about education level, zip code, your gender, affiliations. So they see if they want your opinion in the poll. So they might say, I want everyone in whatever the Temecula zip code is in their first semester between 18 and 20, female at Mount San Jacinto, right? That's how we narrow it. Another important aspect of this polling is good polling questions. If the question sucks, you're not going to get good answers. So you want simply worded questions that are easy to understand, unambiguous, and free of bias. So we don't want to lead people, right? Leading questions encourage respondents to give a desired answer. Polls that intentionally ask leading questions in order to convey politically biased campaign information, those are known as push polls. We don't want that. So I think of the question they teach you in law school, right? How not to ask a question to a witness. Isn't it true you beat your wife on Tuesday? Well, there's some issues there, right? If I say no, is that I don't beat my wife, or is it no that I don't beat my wife on Tuesdays? It could be either way. I also think of the propositions we have in California. Whenever we have these propositions, sometimes I don't even know what we're voting. I have a law degree. We want it to be simple and easy to understand. Then we have this margin of error. So the margin of error is a number that states how far the poll result may be from the actual opinion of the total population of citizens. So the lower the margin of error, the better. Polls that show results too close to call may be within that margin. For example, in an election poll with a margin of error of plus or minus 5%, either candidate A has 52%, candidate B has 48, could win because add 5 and that would get you over the hump. Even if the results show that voters slightly prefer candidate A, the 4% difference between the two is less than the margin of error. And polling technology, how do we do it? This is it. A lot of times nowadays you get on the telephone, internet, social media. My grandma gets them in the mail all the time from the different parties. So there are some still that happen in person. Used to be at the mall on Riverside, there'd be people there doing the polls. Different target populations may engage with one type of technology better than others. So if I want to poll 70 and 80-year-olds, I'm probably not going to go on social media, right? But if I want to get a young person's opinion, I'm probably going to do it via text message or social media. So these things make it hard to get a representative sample of the population because maybe all my money is spent on a social media campaign when I'm alienating certain parts of the population, right, that I'm trying to get. So telephone and mail surveys can ensure respondents are not participating in the poll multiple times. But how do we know who you are? A lot of times because, I'm on my grandma's cell phone plan, right? So when they look up, her name, sometimes the number comes back to me. And so I get these people calling for polls or, political campaign donations or even house repairs, asking for her. What if I said yes, that was her? No one knows. So internet and social media surveys require complex controls to defeat, repeat respondents. We can't just put it on a website and say, oh, let's go to the website over and over and over again, and bots. So we have polling problems that make polls less accurate. High margin of error, data analysis errors, manipulation by the respondents, wrong technology used to engage the target population, sample errors, social pressure really perceived to answer in a particular way. Maybe you're with a group of people. Lack of respondent knowledge. The respondent may be asked a series of questions to prove basic knowledge of the poll subject. And these are all common problems. So here's a poll about California's Proposition 19. One thing I think is interesting if you look in California, right, is we're the people who voted to put the gas tax on the ballot, and we voted to repeal the gas tax. We voted we put the gas tax on the ballot via propositions. We voted for the gas tax, then we got upset, then we got it put back on the propositions, and then we still voted to keep it. So yeah. So then we have the cell phone problem. Cell phones are a unique challenge because your phone isn't tied to a geographic area. My friend in Texas still has his 951 number. Many people keep their numbers when they move, making area codes a less useful tool to narrow down that survey population. I wonder how many of you guys actually answer calls from numbers you don't know. I only do it if I'm trying to get a job and I'm waiting for that, right? So people under 35 are more likely to use only cell phones, ignore unknown callers, silence ringers, or filter calls through voicemail. A lot of young people prefer to text. Thus, reaching enough young people through a phone survey to obtain a representative sample is more difficult than reaching older people. And then we have do not call lists and call blocking that further complicate things. So what affects, personal political opinion? Kind of like what we've talked about. Attitudes, belief, political socialization, identity, life experiences, your geographic location. California is a blue state. Texas is a red state, right? Family and friends, education, resources, the political elites and the media. Here's just an example of how groups voted in 2020. The here you got more men voting, Republican, more women voting Democrat. Race, mostly African Americans vote Democrat. The Republican Party is largely white people. And you'll see, you get liberals are younger. If you get older, you tend to skew more conservative. And then the more, wealthier typically, yes, you skew conservative too. So what are the effects of public opinion? Why do we even care? So public opinion can change and be changed by the political climate. Think of things that are going on in our country, right? Favorability polls. These are polls that measure the public's positive feelings about a politician that can affect voter turnout. Constant media coverage of candidate performance, called horse race coverage, makes elections seem closer than they are. Changing voter behavior and encouraging conclusions unsupported by data. I think it's going to be a long haul with things for the 2024 election, right? Seems like it's in the press every day, especially this prosecution of Donald Trump. It is something that is newsworthy, and that's why they cover it, of course. But it's constant coverage. Increased media coverage of candidates with strong poll numbers can lead to the bandwagon effect, in which a candidate is just presumed to be the winner. So just because they get better media coverage just doesn't mean that they have better, chance to win. It just means they're better at the media. So here's an example of public opinion changing significantly over time, the views on immigrants. So The red line shows immigrants as a burden, the blue line shows them as a strength. So in the 90s, you see how them as a strength kind of went up and down, up and down, up and down. And that's how things happen, right? Here's one for same-sex marriage at the top. You'll see how it skews. So approval for US political institutions. Generally, there's a diffuse support, the widespread belief that the country and its legal system are legitimate. So if you love it that much, the government's that good, I encourage you to go to treasury.gov and donate money to the government, help that budget deficit. Presidential approval begins high, but without defining domestic or international events, it trends downward over time. People are excited to get a new president in office, right? But then we have congressional approval ratings. Those go high and lows. So Congress, remember, you're going to learn that Congress, they kind of have a weird. So every 2 years we vote the House back, and then the Senate is on 6-year terms, but they're spread out, so the entire Senate's not changing every 6 years. The Supreme Court has the highest approval ratings of any branch of government. May kind of be getting away from that nowadays with some of the controversial opinions. There's been a lot of controversial opinions in the last 2 years that will affect the the public approval of the court. So here's the thing about budget cuts. What should we cut? Poll respondents favor cutting programs that directly affect them. Seldom favor, when we're thinking about a lot of these political issues, right? I want you to think of what affects me and my family. And that is what you're going to vote for, things that make your life better. You're going to want to cut things that don't matter to you, right? That's just common sense. Here's an example of President Obama's job approval ratings, really high. He passed Obamacare, Bin Laden was killed, reelected. A lot of this goes up and down, just based on events. Congress, I think it's interesting that congressional approval spiked in, looks like 2002. So because of 9/11. Here is Donald Trump. I didn't actually remember, but in 2016, I guess over 20 candidates, ran. If anyone watched the debate the other night, I think there were 8 or 9 people on stage, and then Trump, he didn't debate. Here's Obama. All right, that is the end of our public opinion lecture.